Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Recover You. Patrick is here.
I'm here.
So we had a couple weeks without you on the, not me, just the podcast.
Yeah. It's never been the same.
Yeah, we had Lily. You listened to her podcast the other day. That was really exciting to have her on, talk about intrusive thoughts. And actually, let's pause there. I would love to hear your feedback on that episode because I have talked to you so much about Lily. Mm-hmm. And after having sessions with her and after working with her and thinking about how her perspective could help so many people in recovery. So I would love to hear just your feedback on that episode.
Well, I think knowing how much work you went through to heal and to kind of go through this, and oddly enough, and I think this has come up in our story, but you had massive intrusive thoughts way back in 15, and that so it's been cool to see you be able to connect with her and be able to manage those in a much more positive way. And there's a lot that the certain addicts can go through that's very helpful for them. The whole notion of like, and I talked to some of the men in the groups, just moving through life and, just the normal everyday act of living. You come across women, you come across men, all that stuff. And some get really scared of what their minds are doing in normal situations.
I think that's a really good way to put it, is like when you have a brain that has that as a tendency, those patterns as a tendency, you can become afraid of what your mind might do. And I think one of the things we talked about in the episode is really coming back into a trust of yourself, and that even if something pops up, it's coming from a place where your brain is trying to help you, maybe trying to protect you, mm-hmm. Maybe it's coming from a good place. And I think that's very different than before you learn about it, going, what the heck is wrong with me? And this is like, I'm broken, or my brain is broken, or it's just really like this war, right? Mm-hmm. And this deep resistance, and that really feeds into fear. And then fear, unfortunately, then feeds into that same cycle, and it perpetuates itself.
Right. Yeah. So it's a great resource for people who are wrestling with that, mm-hmm. Whether you're the betrayed or the addicted, and as those things come up, because, to your point, you're not a bad person. I think especially on the betrayed side, you're going to really come at anything with a sense of shame and how I've messed up. So your thoughts are going to be
the betrayed side or the betrayer?
Betrayer. So you're going to go right into, I'm a horrible person. Mm-hmm. This is just another indication of how much of a horrible person I am because I'm having these thoughts.
So it's kind of interesting because we have, I don't know how to term it, but like we have a combination of different things in our relationship, right? Like you were the addicted, but I'm the one that has the ruminating brain. Mm-hmm. So we have kind of, a lot of times it may be different. And so for you, so I could see how the intrusive thoughts could be helpful for either, for if it's the betrayed partner or the addicted partner. Either way, it's going to complicate your recovery if you don't have an understanding of how your brain works.
Right.
And what to do about it, right? So on the side of the spouse that has sort of watched me go through that, how do you think learning about them has helped you?
It allowed me to help you through them, because I think there for a long time, like part of your story was, you were like, well, I got intrusive thoughts in 15. Now that I know your behavior because of your behavior, and
No, so let's explain that really quickly. So because I had them, and then I found out about your addiction, and we associate sometimes there's a spiritual level to that stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, was there this negative energy in the house that was contributing? Because I had never had them mm-hmm. before 2015, and I didn't know what they were. And then this is a really negative, evil thing that I found out, like, 8 years later, however much later it was. Right. And then I was like, okay, was that somehow contributing? And I had all these questions, right?
Yeah. So,
turns out I have an OCD brain. And
right. Yeah. I mean, it's, certainly me engaging in the behavior, prevents me from showing up and being present and all of those things. Whether there's it's hard to understand the spiritual impact of that because
you can't see it.
Right.
You don't 100% know.
Right. Yeah. You can't see it. But, and then, so there was a big part of me that felt bad for a long time about that. Like, hey, I caused this. And so being able to kind of help you through your processing of a intrusive thought or whatever, and knowing like, within that, like, I'm not going to run away because I'm the reason behind the intrusive thought. Like, I'm actually going to help you through this. And so it's,
well, it makes it less scary for me, and I probably also made it way less scary for you.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like, okay, this is just a brain thing, and we're going to kind of resolve it like most things are with a brain thing. Like mine was a brain thing, and how your body was able to respond to betrayal was a brain thing. And so, we just went through and we solved, using her guidance, we're able to really improve that aspect.
Yeah. And then last week I had, I said it should be turned to the episode Kylene and Friends, because it was Megan and Carly and Sophie, and we all talked about heart's work and things like that. And so I think you've seen me really work through a lot using those techniques and the subconscious processing and stuff like that. You've done similar things with your therapist, but you're also going to go through a process of learning how to do all this subconscious work too. Are you excited about that?
I am. We've talked about this before. I have no desire to be a therapist or no desire to be a coach at this point. I mean, who knows what the future holds. But I think being able to approach people from a much more emotionally supportive way helps with our son. It helps with my family. It helps with work. It helps with all. I mean, I was talking to a gentleman yesterday from work who's struggling with direction and things like that. And there's a lot of negative self-beliefs in there. And so, I was asking the question, well, what's going on that makes you feel that way? And
you're the best non-coach coach. I mean, you very much absorb the language and you absorb the information, and whether it's from me or your therapist or whoever, as we sort of learn these things and talk about these things, you've read some books that have this kind of context to it, the subconscious and beliefs and how to have difficult conversations and all these sorts of different things. And you really absorb that language. And I see it in how you give advice and how you communicate and how you problem solve and connect with other human beings. And so just in case you're wondering, and I haven't told you enough, there are a lot of people that have asked me before. Several people have asked me, hey, is your husband ever going to coach men?
Yeah. Well, maybe,
in case you'd ever have that as a thought.
Maybe one day I will. But yeah, I really enjoy being able to help folks and use my story and being able to lead with empathy and help folks. So I'm excited, whether it's a coaching a 7 pillars group or a conquer group or whatever that may be, and being able to approach them the most effective way I can is very important.
I'm hopeful as well that you have a similar experience that I did in the actual practitioner training itself, where it really allowed me to kind of I don't want to say wrap up processing, because I feel like the healing journey is like a lifelong ongoing thing, but it really kind of took me to another level of processing some things that I just maybe felt stuck on, or kind of pushing me in the right direction. And so I'm hopeful that, not that I think that, you have a long list of things to work on, but
no, I get it.
But I hope that, that you have the positive experience of, like, as you're learning all of these techniques, you get to practice them in the week. And for me, that was very, very impactful, especially in the container where, like, that's the point for the week, is to focus on these things. And so that was really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about brain problems, let's talk about OCD and our trip to Greece and trauma recovery and how that all connected together.
Yeah.
Because it was very, very cool for me, actually, to go on this trip and then come home and have some self-reflection about it. So we went to Greece. I don't know if we mentioned that on the podcast or not, but we went to Greece to sort of stalk Keegan
Right.
as he and the West Point Glee Club went over for spring break to sing 3 different performances in 3 different Greek cities. And it was very, very cool to have that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we started in Kavala up in northern Greece, and then we went down to Larissa. We traveled through Thessaloniki, and we ended up in Athens.
Right.
Yeah, so it was very fun. And we really didn't do a whole lot of planning ourselves because we sort of had to follow their itinerary, but then a travel agency sort of figured out like how we could do that and then gave us some things to do as well.
Right. Yeah. It was an amazing trip. I was stationed in Europe in the Army. So being able to go back to Europe, 20 some odd years. And actually, I thought about this like, and we can talk about it a little bit more, but I've always wanted to take you to Europe, right? I've always wanted to do that. And then of course, Discovery hits and you go, man, I don't even know if we're going to make it to Kroger. So it's like,
I'm really not kidding about that.
Yeah. So it's like, being able to have that trip, and it's a little nerve wracking, right? Because you're like, okay, what, because Europe views things differently, right? As far as certain things. And so it's like, modesty. So are we going to get, there are going to be some weird triggers that we're going to have to navigate and anything like that. And so I was a little nervous about that. And I knew that, you talk about OCD. We had gone on trips before, Disney World and
now let's just pause for a moment and kind of share that story real briefly.
Yeah, so we
couple sentences of how horrible that was.
Right. Yeah, so we went to Disney World for Keegan's spring break his senior year. He wanted to go to Disney World,
and that was we had just passed like the 1 year, right?
Yeah, it was 22. So we just passed the 1 year, and it was a nice trip. We stayed
1 year D-Day.
Yeah, we stayed on the property, and had a nice itinerary. So and it's Disney World, so it's relatively clean and stuff like that. And your OCD was on fire. It was stay away from that trash can. Have you washed your hands and just very through the roof. And we ended up having an argument over it, a pretty bad one. And I didn't handle it very well. I could have approached you with much more sympathy and empathy, than I did. But it was even to the point, and Keegan's never really done this, but he came up to me, he's like, Dad, I think it's worse. He actually he made that comment to me. He's like, is she okay? Because it's worse.
So there were a couple things I think that played into that. One, we were coming out of COVID. So like you had this whole thing of in your own home, everything's in a certain environment and all that kind of stuff, right? And so we just had all come out of that. Then right after that, we went immediately into betrayal and trauma. And what do you do as a betrayed partner? You are scrambling for control.
Mm-hmm.
And you're scrambling for safety and security and all this kind of stuff. Well, my lovely brain has a pastime of OCD. And so it goes coping mechanism, let me ramp this up. And so it was kind of just like the storm, right? The cascade that we wanted to take advantage of Keegan's last spring break at home. And so we did this, and there was just so much going on. I think my brain and my system was like control everything. But when we had that argument, you were upset because it was very frustrating because I was putting a lot on you guys, right, to make me feel okay. But then I think what I said in the middle of the argument or towards whatever, that I was like something to the effect of, do you think I like this? Right. It was not pleasant. And it's actually in a weird way, kind of like we would say, I'd never wish betrayal on anyone. But in a weird way, that experience of going to Disney World and having it be so out of control was a good thing, because up until that point, usually, historically, it sort of has always manifested a little bit more in traveling or areas like that, things like that. And then at home, it's like pretty non-existent in terms of like you never really know, right? But because it was sort of like that, it was like, it's not like that big of a deal. It's just sort of manageable and that sort of thing. And so in a way, it was good because it frustrated me. It got to a point in that trip where I was like, this is bad. This is impacting you, but it's impacting me. And this is uncomfortable. to the point that I don't want to live like this forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember, right as you were saying this, I kind of remember why I had kind of pushed back on you kind of hard, maybe not with much caring, is getting over a year is a big milestone, right? And I'm feeling very confident. And there's still boundaries up and stuff like that I was kind of like, well, I don't know if, and it felt to me, it wasn't accurate, but it felt to me like you were just trying to control me. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't quite take fully into account what was going on in your brain. So I was like, all she wants to do is just control me. She wants to control where I walk. She wants to control, you know what I mean? And I was like, this is hard. Like, this is, and so I think when you said, do you think I want to be this way? That I remember being like, oh man.
Yeah, I think that kind of shut everything down really fast.
Yeah.
And I think looking back, we were both unhappy with it.
Yeah. Right.
And we were able to kind of work through that in the moment and
we ended up having a really good rest of the trip after that blew up.
Okay, so fast forward.
Yep. I did say to you before we got on the plane, I said, listen, this is a test. If you can't handle Europe, we're not going back. Yeah. So
if you said that before, or if you just thought it.
Yeah. It was. But I was like, I was very excited.
But this was a big deal. I'd never been to Europe. There were very, very, very long flights. Usually, the most uncomfortable part of a trip is the flights for me, like being on the airplanes and stuff like that, and airplane bathrooms. So.
Yeah, so she did really well, and so the first the only moderate meltdown you had was the first travel day.
Let's clarify.
Yeah, I get it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how moderate was it?
It was probably a 4.
Oh my gosh, no! It was like a 1 or a 2. Are you kidding me?
Okay, it's a 1 or 2. But what happened was. We had 4 flight legs to get there, and then we had a 2-hour drive to get to our hotel.
Okay, so first of all, it was almost a 24-hour trip to get from home to where we were going. Mm-hmm. And then we get there, so somewhere in the 20s, and we get there and we realize, oh my gosh, we have another 1.5 to 2 hours to drive to still get to our destination. So you psych yourself up for like the 4 really long flights that's taking like a day, right? And then you're like, oh my gosh. But even that didn't really bother me. I was like, okay, here we go. We got our bags. We got our driver. We get in the car. It's a nice car. He has snacks for us. We were like, woo.
Yeah. No, it was, and what happened was, the hotel room was fine. Like it was fine. But it wasn't the cleanest hotel room. And you always go, what's that stain on the floor? You know what I mean? There's things like that, but it was like, it had this beautiful view of the bay.
Have a beautiful view.
Had free breakfast. And so it turned out okay. But I do remember telling him, like, we can't go anywhere else.
Yeah. So what happened was, to me, at the end of long travel or at the end of a trip or at the end of a day on vacation, the reward is like the clean hotel bed, right? And we walk in and I don't even necessarily know that it wasn't clean, but it was old and things weren't replaced, right? So there was a big stain on the carpet that made it look very dirty. So it was a really old carpet with like a big, huge stain, like somebody had bled out of the carpet. That probably wasn't what happened, but you never know. Yeah. And then it was very much a motel-y kind of bed with like the not plush comforter, and it just, so the appearance, even though it was probably very clean, felt not very nice, right? And so I was like tired. It had been a very long day, and my reward for accomplishing the day, doing a really good job with everything, went away.
Yeah,
so that's kind of, I think so.
I do remember. This is funny. So like, you go to Europe and there's places where Americans aren't liked and stuff like that. And there was no evidence of that. But I remember that from being stationed over there. You always had to kind of be mindful and watchful and stuff like that. So we get ready. We go from the checkout desk. And I think we're up on the 6th floor or something. And the elevator's like super tiny. You go, I'm going to take the stairs, and off you go.
No. Okay. So the elevator is so small, it opens up. Patrick gets in with the suitcases. I can't fit.
Yeah.
So there's stairs right behind me. He's going up to the 6th floor. I'm like, I'll meet you there. So but this is where it gets bad. The elevator door closes. I realize I've given you my purse, so I don't even have my phone with me.
I know.
I start walking up the stairs, and the first floor I get to isn't the first floor. So I walk up several flights and then I'm finally getting to it says 1. And then I was kind of confused. Like, does it go the opposite direction? Did I go the wrong way? Like, what's happening? So then I try to go back down to the elevator, and then I get in the elevator and there's a man in the elevator, and there's like 3 square feet in this elevator. And I am alone in this tiny little box. And I don't know the language, and I don't have my phone with me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I get up to the 6th floor, and I'm like wandering the hall like, Patrick.
I know. So like I have her phone. I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been here 2 hours and I've already lost her. And so like it's just
We won't
crazy.
do that again.
No.
I thought it'd be easier to find the 6th floor. Anyway, so we get there. And so anyway, I was like, we're here. There's nothing I can do about it. I need to figure out how to make this work. Right. And so I'm kind of processing up. But then at that point, my emotions, I was very tired. And I think my emotions just needed a little bit of an outlet.
Mhm.
And so then I kind of let you know how I was feeling and cried for like 30 seconds. And then what was great is we went to bed. Everything was fine. I woke up the next day and I was like, I did it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It was hard. I mean, there was a lot of, I mean, it's just, you're just flat out worn out,
Yeah.
and you're getting on different planes. And
okay. So other than that, everything went great.
that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And I mean, we were like,
she was trying new food. She was eating gluten, which is something she never does. And so,
okay, the important part about that, it didn't stress me out.
yeah.
So it's one thing to like force yourself to do something and then your nervous system is like freaking out, right? It's another thing to have done so much work, and this is how we're going to kind of tie it in here. You're like, why are you telling us your story about grief and OCD and all this kind of stuff? Without the trauma work and the healing and the mindset work and all this kind of stuff that I've like really dug into, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, what do you think my perspective would have been on anything gluten at all?
Actually, well, real quick, a year ago, we flew, or a little less than a year ago, we flew to California for my knee surgery.
Mhm.
And remember the bathroom thing? You were like, don't use the bathroom in the plane. I was like,
Oh, I hate
but
plane bathrooms.
I know you do, but it's like,
I
Yeah.
don't love them too.
I know. Yeah. Well, and nobody does, but it's like, well, you didn't tell me to not use the bathroom on any of the plane flights, so I mean, that just kind of shows it. And I think it really goes into, when you start a healing process, you want to hit the big stuff, right? You want to be like, hey, I want to get over, this abuse I experienced, or I want to get over the reasons why I was a sex addict, or I want to, learn how to trust again. You do all these things, but then as you continue down your healing journey, you start to address other things. What is it? How can I be more present for people? Is there a wound in me that prevents me from doing that? And that's why healing is so important. And it has very varied twists and turns and pathways. And sometimes you go through the swamp, sometimes you go through the magical forest in your healing journey, or whatever that is. But
here's how it all ties together. OCD for me was a trauma response.
Mhm.
So I didn't really like go into this going, oh, betrayal, I'm going to use this to heal my OCD.
Mhm.
But when I went to the practitioner training, whatever year that was, was it early 2022, maybe was the first one that I did, and did that week-long training. There was one exercise that I did, and I was upset because we had gone to Disney World together. And so that was fresh in my mind. I think the training was like a month later or something like that.
Mhm.
And so I did this exercise where I was yelling at my OCD, and it was perceptual positions where like usually you do it when you're thinking about like a relationship, and you're so like if I was upset with you or had a conflict with you, I might use this to get all of my emotions out towards you in a safe way, because it's not really you, it's imaginary you in front of me. And then I step into you and then respond back, and then do a higher perspective. And so I actually kind of just decided like to do it with my OCD, where I just like let it out on my OCD and how annoyed I was. And then I stepped into, what I know now is the part of my OCD. I stepped into the OCD's perspective, that part of me that presented that way. And it was like, I want to help you. I'm here for you. Whatever it was that it said, that was very much like, I'm just trying to, I'm like, I'm on your side, and there were tears and all this kind of stuff. And that's the only exercise I specifically did for OCD, like the only one. And then I continued on the rest of the week and we did all these exercises and the subconscious work. And then, of course, I've continued the process the past couple of years in a variety of different ways. And so, yeah, it isn't necessarily like, oh, I did these 10 steps to work on my OCD. It was healing my brain. It was making my nervous system feel safe.
Yeah.
It was dealing with the trauma. So for me, it was specifically correlated to a traumatic thing in childhood. And then as my brain sort of started processing, then it was like, here's a coping mechanism for you, OCD. And then I developed it. And then it's manifested in a couple different ways throughout my life, sometimes more or less noticeable. And I didn't realize until I went to therapy for betrayal, someone pointed out to me that rumination and intrusive thoughts and stuff like that is part of OCD. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I never had connected those, And so it just manifested in me in different ways. But my brain now knows when it's very uncomfortable and very, very stressed that that's an option for it. But so again, I didn't do like 10 steps to heal my OCD, but it was this deep, deep commitment of going through this process of creating safety in my life. And I want to put a pause with that statement, because from a place of fear, we feel like safety is when we can control everything.
Mm-hmm.
But that belief is that's what OCD is trying to do, right? It's trying to control.
Right.
We can't control everything. So actual safety and actual healing is getting to a place where you feel safe without the control.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you go, I don't actually need this as a coping mechanism anymore because I'm actually okay. And so it's just a really weird, fascinating, wonderful side effect, I think, of all of this, how calm my nervous system was this entire trip with every single part of it was new. So many flights in a row, long flights, international flights. Greece was new. The food was new. I was trying food that I have taught so many classes years ago that were like, never, ever eat gluten. Like, don't even, like, it's not even an option. And I still kind of, to be fair, we don't eat gluten here. Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit different in Europe than it is here. But there was no stress associated with it.
None. And you were a blast to be with. I mean, you were an absolute, it's just like, it was awesome. It was relaxing, it was all of these things. It was just fun to be with you, and you weren't triggered over like the past or anything like that. There was a few things we talked about at the beginning that were, whatever. I think it was a movie I was watching on the plane, but we had talked about it. There was actually really nothing there. And I think it might've just been, you were tired or something like that. Like it wasn't
even like, I think we've talked about this on different episodes where it's like triggers are more of like, thoughts or conversations, and they are like big responses now. So like we just, something had come up, you mentioned it to me, we talked about it, that was it.
Right. And so now it's like, and I've been thinking about it, hey, where are we going to go next? And like, we got a brochure in the mail yesterday. I was like, oh, let's go do that. So I'd like, it's very much an exciting thing. And I was actually thinking about this. There's a pattern sometimes in healing from betrayal where the betrayed partner, if you're moving towards a therapeutic disclosure, is they will stay in therapy until the disclosure, and then they'll say, okay, I'm done. And I think this is a good example of the benefit of continuing to pursue your own healing and how it shows up and how it makes life itself more enjoyable. And so, like, sure, you can do that. You can be with a therapist through disclosure and then quit. And
to be clear, first of all, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I also used a variety of different types of therapists and coaches throughout this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I had my specific betrayal trauma, that focus, support for like a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So it was much, much, much longer than the disclosure for sure. But then I've also worked with Lily. I've also worked with the subconscious reprogramming. Part of my own personal training was going through, like we talked about, the exercises myself, and that was part of it. And then, and Amanda, I had her on the podcast recently, worked with her. And so just like a combination of team support. So it doesn't have to be just one person. So I do feel like if you kind of get stuck and that's why, as I was going through and I was like, I really want to help women. I want to coach women. And I was like, I know that I have the functional medicine background and it impacts your physical health and I can help people in that area, but that is just not going to cut it. And when I went through the training for the subconscious and the brain rewiring and the healing, I was like, that is the piece that is going to be so helpful, because it really took me to another level and just helped so much. And so I love doing that work with my clients. It's so rewarding to experience it and then facilitate it. And then you get so much out of it too when you are the person facilitating. It's just the coolest thing to watch people and to guide them through it and to know that, I've experienced something similar anyway, we're getting a little off track here, but so I agree with you. This isn't just a betrayal thing. It's a healing thing. It's a human thing. Betrayal, and I never want to, this might not be the thing to say to somebody a couple weeks into it, but this is the opportunity that betrayal offers, is you are now forced into, well, let me say this, actually, because you're not forced. A lot of people don't choose that route. Right. The door is now open for you to choose a healing path. Right. Betrayal goes, this is a wound. What are you going to do with it? And so you can slap a Band-Aid on it, or you can work with the team that cleans it out, gets the dirt out, seals it up and stitches it up really well, checks on it periodically, sees where the weak points are, do some physical therapy for it, right? That's the process that betrayal offers to us. Right. And again, whether or not you choose to stay with your partner, that's the opportunity it offers to you as an individual. And so I'm so glad. You're right, because I just, at the point of Disney World, I was like, I don't want to deal with this the rest of my life. Yeah. And I would say also, kind of like you had the addiction tendency, I would assume, because this started probably when it's somewhere like 10 to 12 in my life, that pattern developed. So I probably would have a tendency towards that the rest of my life. And it's something that I need to be conscientious of. Or if I allow myself to get stressed without sort of checking it, it could go all the way back to Disney World level again. Right. Yeah. The one thing that it is that you've always been really good at is being completely self-aware of what's happening and what's going on. And, there's never really any denial in you of your own things that you're working through or how you feel. Like, we were joking the other day. I was like, well, you didn't have to say that. You're like, yeah, I kind of did. You know what I mean? So like, clarify that, because that's kind of just so what's in my head comes out my mouth. That's right. So, that's to your credit. Yes, I'm very self-aware, and also to your credit, you also learn about, she's got ADD, or, and we're going to talk about that in a second. She's got OCD, or like these different things. And then you sort of kind of like addiction. It's not like, it's this free for all of like, we're just going to deal with it. But it certainly brings a lot of understanding and awareness and empathy, I think, with it. Yeah. Both directions. Yeah. I was joking with you because the way you'll communicate sometimes, and it can be confusing for me, is you'll be like, you perpetrated the biggest mental harm that's ever happened to me in my life. But you look really sexy today. I'll be like, what? Like my mind doesn't quite know how to handle those things sometimes. I'm like, and we'll be having one conversation and be like, I don't know, saying something about the betrayal and like how hard it was, and then like 5 minutes later, we're laughing and doing something else. And that's because it's not like this huge trigger necessarily. It's like, I will tell the truth, and it's not that we don't talk about it. But then that's not where we're at right now. Okay. Right. Okay. So this leads us very nicely with all of my wonderful special brain problems. To what are we doing this weekend? Or what am I doing this weekend? You're not coming with me. I was like, I'm mowing the lawn. Okay. So I'm going to go get my brain scanned, which is hilarious because, this is not going to sound hilarious with the next sentence, but I had cancer in 2019. So let me clarify what I mean. I had cancer in 2019. So of course, all my family knows that, right? And my sister and brother-in-law live near, and my parents lived near, and my mom and dad often babysit my sister's kids and that sort of thing. So they're often in communication about scheduling. And so my mom and my sister are texting about scheduling, and my mom texts her back and she's like, no, just so you know, we can't do this weekend. She put the dates out there or whatever. This was a while ago. She's like, we can't do this weekend in April because Kai's getting her brain scan. And she assumed Sammy knew, my sister knew. And my sister and brother-in-law were like,
What?
Yeah. Like, because I had cancer, my sister was like, what's going on? And so anyway, that's what's funny. So I am getting my brain scans this weekend. Well, actually Monday and Tuesday. I'm very excited about it. Why am I doing this? So I just sort of walked you through a couple basic ways that my brain tends to be a little different. And that, while that is a motivation for me, it's not necessarily like I'm doing like very, very well right now. And so it's not necessarily to quote unquote fix anything right now. That it does play a piece in my motivation to learn more about my brain. However, what's a little bit even more motivating for me long term is my grandmother passed away with dementia. My uncle passed away with Parkinson's. My other uncle's currently getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I believe. My dad has Parkinson's. His aunt had significant mental health imbalances. And so I have pretty significant and scary brain stuff on both sides of my family. And then I've had these massive manifestations of intrusive thoughts, OCD, what I believe to be pretty strong ADD, and just massive levels of like anxiety and stuff like that throughout my life. And so I'm very, very interested in learning more about my brain, how I can take care of it, and how to, if at all within my power, prevent any damage to my brain and promote the health of my brain as I move, through life and into older age. And so Dr. Daniel Amen, if any of you guys have heard of him, is a really sort of world renowned, famous psychiatrist who focuses on health and functional medicine, and I guess a combination, like an integrative approach of functional, holistic, and medical approaches to support your brain. And so he is someone who has started Amen clinics across the country. There's like 5 different clinics, and he trains practitioners how to do his approach. And one of the biggest pieces of what he does is he does SPECT scans. So SPECT, SPECT scans. And if you've ever like been on social media and you've seen these pictures, maybe in this context, you've seen the pictures of your brain on porn. Or the comparison of like a porn addict brain and a cocaine addict brain and a healthy brain or something like that. And they're like blue and purple images of the brain. Those are SPECT scans. And so what the SPECT scan will do is it actually looks at the texture of your brain. So a lumpy brain is less healthy than a smooth brain. The smoother it is, the healthier it is on these scans. And then also the blood flow. So for example, in different episodes, you've talked about the amygdala being super active in addiction. Well, it's also very active in things like OCD. And so what you'll see is more blood flow to the amygdala. And if over time, the blood flow keeps pumping into a certain region of the brain, it can make that part of the brain bigger and other parts smaller. And so they're going to be able to see where the blood flow goes and how everything is sort of working and the lumpiness and all this kind of stuff. And then they do an assessment. I've never, ever, ever had an official diagnosis of anything. There's no way I don't have OCD. It's so obvious. It happened when I was young. And then, like I said, I had my therapist kind of said OCD. She didn't diagnose it, but she said OCD. And then she also was like complex trauma. I'm like, oh, okay. And started putting those pieces together long ago. Anyway, so I'm very, very curious to not only get the brain scan, but because of their process, I also go through like an official diagnosis process to see like what they quote unquote label me with. So that will be very, very interesting to see how that lines up with my personal life experience, my own understanding of everything that I've gone through and everything I've sort of learned and identified with over the past couple of years very, very strongly. So I'm really curious about that. And then they also go through a process we go through 2 scans, one just totally at rest, and one that is like, I think, focusing on something. So it's like when your brain is like active and they rescan it. So I get 2 scans, and then I sit down with somebody. They give me, if I apply for whatever, any diagnoses or whatever. And then of course, what they're going to recommend. Now, Sometimes they might just do like nutrition or supplemental support. That might be really based on maybe how dramatically it's impacting your life right now. I don't know. Sometimes they might do like a combination. They definitely do medication as well. So I have at this point no idea what's going to be recommended for me. I'm very, very curious to see what comes out of it. We will definitely share it when I find out. But I'm really curious. So I'm really excited about it too. But again, a big part of the motivation is like I have it coming at me from both sides of my genealogy, and so to sort of get a better understanding of like where the health of my brain is right now, and the blood flow, and what I can do maybe to even just keep it healthy as I age.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what you come up with, because there's been some times that I know you've said this, and you've mentioned it at times, like is there something wrong with me? And because as you're frustrated with what your brain's doing, and you can't turn it off, and things like that. So I think it'll be exciting to see what comes out of this.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I think hopefully we share this part of our story and all that kind of stuff, but also hopefully it's something that as we go through, maybe it can be helpful for you too, because I do think that having different things like ADD, like OCD, like whatever it is that is a little bit different than, but just like Patrick has a very calm mind, right? And it's very quiet in there, which amazes me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how you think. But I think when you have a very, very active brain, whether you're the betrayed partner or the addict, it can definitely play a role in how you handle recovery, and in some ways making it harder, depending on what's going on. And so I think that's going to be something every couple can think about talking about, like, how does your brain work? How do you think? How do you, and I've thought about doing a specific episode on that too, kind of going into the differences. And so maybe we'll do that, but we'll leave that here for now. I will definitely share my results for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and plan our next trip to Europe. And
where are we going to go?
I don't know. Where do you want to go?
Literally everywhere.
Literally everywhere. Okay. So let's go there.
Yeah, it'll be very fun. So we will see you next week.
Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.